Hey guys, my name is Emma,
My name is Julia.
and this week we decided to talk about bulletin board systems or BBS. So, just as an introduction, BBSs were the online version of a community bulletin board, and they were often thought about as the pre internet. And they were pretty popular in the 1980s and 90s, but were created a little bit before that. And they're categorized as a Web 2.0 technology, which we'll get into a bit later. And below in this picture, you can kind of see an example of what one of those may have looked like. And so, as a description, and just to understand the technology a bit more, they were created in 1978 by Ward Christensen and Randy Seuss, who were members of a computer hobbyist club, basically. And what happened is there was a snowstorm and everyone couldn't meet, so they kind of figured out this way that they could have a meeting virtually, and it turned into this whole new technology. And what it what it did was that personal computer owners had modems that they could dial into, and it tended to be within the same area code. So it was like these local pockets of like pre-internet basically. And what people could do on there was look into new software, read posts, send messages, and play games. And this would be an example of an asynchronous communication where people don't all have to be online at the same time to leave messages. You can just log in and be able to see what people are posting. And this is in a picture of one of the inventors of the technology. And so just for more historical background and context on BBS was that, like I said, they had created this technology during like a snowstorm in Chicago in 1978 because they wanted to be able to get their information and meet and then basically post their newsletter. And it turned into them figuring out this way that people could connect and interact. And people, like one important point is just that they were local. And this is specifically because of high prices of phone bills and stuff at the time. So technically you could connect anywhere, but people stayed local because it was more expensive to call outside of your area code. And then it kind of started in this Chicago area, but eventually became popular throughout the United States. And again, people stayed in these local pockets. So it could have been similar to the internet potentially where everyone was interacting, but really people had these isolated areas like in their neighborhood and area code, like I said. But it does look different than websites we've seen today, and a lot of them are kind of colorful and like kind of these pixelated graphics and made out of text and keyboard symbols. And this one we see on the right is called The Cave, and that was an example of them. And if you look just quickly back at these pictures, they kind of show examples. And then to compare what we're talking about with BBSs to our class readings of the week, this BBS technology would fall into Web 2.0, even though it seems kind of early in time for what we might think Web 2.0 is. It's an example of how people are creating content and interacting with content online and producing rather than just, scrolling and like not really interacting as much with the content like Web 1.0, and then Web 3.0 is something we're still working towards, which might have a bit more like semantic data processing and all this different stuff. So yeah, this is a really good example of Web 2.0 technology. And then we can compare it to our class reading, another class reading where we learned about the muds and moos and like lambda mu that we all kind of saw and worked with. But it was, they were both created in the late 70s, and they're both examples of Web 2.0 technology. But with muds and moos, those are synchronous communications, so people can interact with them only when they're all online. They're both text-based. A moo is a little bit more global rather than just local, but it's just a space where people don't have to use their real identity to communicate and socialize.
So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the connection with external sources. And for this part, I just looked at what other sources had to say about the bulletin board system and its advancement to technology. So, according to the article, bulletin board systems at the highest peak, the system's presence topped over 60,000 in the United States, which just shows how this system really was a big advancement and it increased at a very rapid pace because this was just in the United States alone. From these 60,000 systems, newspapers operated about 60 of them, which led to the advancement of technologies like the electronic trip in 1990, which then goes back to how the bulletin board system really did contribute to other technologies that we would later see down the line in society. And going along with this, I'm going to talk about how the bulletin board system allowed other users to connect to one another and how it influenced multi-line and multi-node systems. So again, going back to the article, bulletin board systems, these systems did take a while to reach their highest potential. Like any technology that we see in society today, it does take a while for the users to adapt to the technology and for them to understand how they can incorporate it into their everyday lives. But once they did, bulletin board systems allowed users, over 256 users at a time, to connect with one another during a single period of time, which really contributed to allowing users to connect to one another without not having to be in the same spaces and also in an abundance. So this connection between multiple users was often referred to as multi-line systems. And there are also systems that allow users to connect to one another, but from different devices, which was referred to as multi-node systems, which goes into how the BBS system kind of adapted not having to be on the same technological device to connect to one another. So going into this, I'm going to talk about the FidoNet, our Fido network, and sharing and how BBS incorporated into this as well. So as the bulletin board system progressed, the worldwide network, Fido, our FidoNet, was used to allow BBS data sharing on a big platform. This allowed for nodes to receive this downloaded content, which led to the expansion of FidoNet nodes at an increasingly fast pace. FidoNet was the first bulletin board operating system, eventually grew to a node network platform of over 20,000, which again shows you how big this technological advancement reached different people. And eventually FidoNet would become incorporated with the bulletin board software and a stable piece for assembling networks. And also going deeper into this, the BBS system was largely connected to file sharing and multi-user gaming. A term known as National Mail Hour was often used to describe the period of time when bulletin board systems were not accessible to users. And then there were also time periods where administrators of bulletin board systems created spaces to diffuse arguments that were made present on the online world, which is very important, especially when talking about how there's so much accessible content on the web that we even see today, that there were actually administrators designated to kind of get the negative spaces out of these technologies to make it more of a positive atmosphere and a positive sharing environment for users. So that was a very important aspect as well. So to kind of wrap everything up, we learned a lot from the bulletin board system and what it has allowed us to do, especially in today's society. The bulletin board system contributed tremendously to information storage and data exchange. Users were able to collect information in abundance, and it also paved the way for many of the technologies that we see today, like the emailing system and different social media platforms, which really advance digital communication on a larger scale.
Cool. And then our discussion question is just asking how the readings from this week talk about different versions of the web and how we can give examples of Web 1, 2, and 3.0 technologies that influenced BBS or came after it. And we just want to know if you think these distinctions are necessary. And this is our works cited. Thank you guys so much for watching.